this virus. Meanwhile, Dr. Gupta, the White House is attempting to discredit infectious disease expert Dr. Anthony Fauci amid his dire warnings about the Trump administration's coronavirus response. A White House official told NBC News yesterday that, quote, several White House officials are concerned about the number of times Dr. Fauci has been wrong on things. The administration then shared a list with several news outlets that included nearly a dozen past comments by Fauci, which a Trump official said had ultimately proven erroneous. The list included Fauci's January comment that the virus was, quote, not a major threat, and his guidance in March that, quote, people should not be walking around with masks. A senior administration official told the Washington Post that Fauci no longer briefs Trump and is, quote, never in the Oval Office anymore. According to a person with knowledge of Trump's calendar, Fauci last spoke to him during the first week of June. Fauci has not yet commented on these reports. I'm going to bring in the reporter on this. Let's bring in national political reporter for NBC News, Josh Lederman. What's the deal with this strategy? Is it because the president is embarrassed by Fauci? Because many could say that the president's getting embarrassed by the science, which is proving him wrong every day. Having super spreader events in Tulsa, Oklahoma, will kill people if the pandemic, if the virus is passed around. This isn't Fauci. This is science. So why are they taking it out on him?
Well, Mika, you expect a White House to lob political attacks at its opponents, maybe at members of Congress or the media from time to time. You don't expect the White House to be doing an oppo dump on its own top infectious disease control doctor, particularly as a pandemic is raging across the country. But as you just laid out so well, that's exactly what seems to be happening with the 1-2 punch of this statement provided to us over the weekend from a White House official saying several White House officials concerned about his past statements, as well as this list with citations of all of his past comments from much earlier in the pandemic when, frankly, doctors did not know nearly what they know now about how this virus is transmitted. And Mika, as all of this was playing out, Dr. Brett Giroir, the testing czar, was on Meet the Press talking about Dr. Fauci as well. Take a listen to what he had to say.
I respect Dr. Fauci a lot, but Dr. Fauci is not 100% right, and he also doesn't necessarily, and he admits that, have the whole national interest in mind. He looks at it from a very narrow public health point of view.
So, Mika, why is the White House doing this? Well, we know that the narrative from President Trump versus Dr. Fauci about coronavirus and how we're doing has been getting farther and farther apart. President Trump says we're doing a great job. Dr. Fauci says just in the last few days that there's no way to say objectively, if you look at the United States compared to other countries, that we're doing a good job. And at the moment, Dr. Fauci appears to be winning the trust argument. A New York Times Siena poll from just a few weeks ago showing that 2 in 3 Americans trust Dr. Fauci compared to just 1 in 4 trusting Donald Trump and approving of him at the moment. The White House apparently trying to change those numbers as we get closer to the November election.
Okay, so Jonathan Lemire, first of all, the first comment of Dr. Fauci's that they say is wrong, and I believe it's, this virus is doesn't have to be this serious, or I forget what the exact statement was. Yes, if you mitigate, if you actually do what the CDC guidelines tell you to do, you can actually bring these numbers down, and it doesn't have to be so serious. But it is because the president has not federalized the response, because the president has not had clear leadership on this, because the president has been wrong so many times you can't even count. Anyone who wants a test can get a test. Remember when he said that? Remember when he said it would magically go away? Remember he just said it would just disappear? Remember when he said it was just one person coming from China? Does he really want to compare Fauci being wrong to the president being wrong? Because every time they go after Fauci and take out of context something that he has said to try and make it look like he's got the science wrong, everybody will notice that ever since January, the president has got this wrong every step of the way. He has tried to wish this away. He has not cared about people. On a day that 100,000 people died, he was worried about himself and nothing else. This is pathetic. I don't think it'll work. And ultimately, Jonathan Lemire, politically, take me to Florida. We're breaking records right now in Florida. If we continue to break coronavirus records, worse than New York, Governor DeSantis, weeks ago you said, oh my gosh, people are saying we could be as bad as New York. We never would be. We're worse than New York in Florida, Governor DeSantis, with your open bars and opening the schools. And who the hell cares about people's lives? Well, Jonathan Lemire, early voting starts when? And how's that going to impact the president if people are dropping dead from the coronavirus?
Well, first, Mika, the length of mistakes that Donald Trump has made about the coronavirus certainly dwarfs those that Dr. Anthony Fauci has made. There's no question of that. And there's another key difference. Dr. Fauci has admitted on occasion where he has gotten things wrong in those early days of the pandemic before the total severity of it was fully known. We certainly know that it is a rare moment when President Trump ever admits a mistake. To follow Josh's point about an opposition file, it's extraordinary that the White House would circulate these talking points to reporters, to allies, to point out the moments that Dr. Fauci was incorrect. He's Dr. Fauci, who enjoys far more public support and trust than Donald Trump certainly does. We know that the West Wing has restricted for a number of months now Dr. Fauci's media appearances. He hasn't appeared at a coronavirus task force briefing. Those have been rare, but those that have happened, he has infrequently been there. His media appearances have been really cut down. He's found ways to do alternative media, a lot of podcasts, live streams like that, but he's been largely kept off of the cable news shows, the Sunday shows, where he'd have a much larger audience. And that's in part because the president and his advisors were annoyed the moments where Dr. Fauci contradicted him, and he contradicted him because he was speaking the truth, sticking to the science, sticking to the facts, and not just trying to wish it away. There was some, as the advisors have told me, some jealousy on the president's part as well. But to your point on the politics, that can't be overstated here. Early voting in a lot of states starts in September. That's 6 weeks away. Right now, the coronavirus is surging throughout this country, particularly in Florida, as you say, just set a record for single-day cases. President Trump cannot win re-election if he loses Florida. There's no path. There's no map that allows him to do so. And I think that is also what we're seeing here, is that everything the White House is doing about the pandemic is through a political lens. Certainly, critics are charging that they're putting their re-election interests, which means opening up the economy ahead of public health. And this is just the latest front on that. And it connects, Mika, as a final point, to how we opened this hour about the rally in New Hampshire. In February, before the pandemic really came to American shores, the president drew over 10,000 people to a rally in New Hampshire, in Manchester. Now he has to cancel one this weekend in Portsmouth when aides were concerned that more or less no one would show up. The reason behind that? This pandemic. They can't get their hands around it, so what they're trying to do is point fingers elsewhere.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.